Today's guest is the Paralympic athlete who's dominated not one but two disciplines. Her accolades include world champion, European champion, and three-time gold medalist Olympian. She was diagnosed with endometriosis in 2020, only 8 months before the Tokyo Games. I'm delighted to introduce Charlotte Henshaw MBE. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. It's really exciting because I can't wait to hear about obviously your story with endometriosis, but also how it relates to being a sportswoman and a professional athlete, because we haven't had that story yet on the podcast. So it's one that I really want to explore. Can we start with when symptoms started for you with endometriosis? Was it 2013?
Yeah, around that time. So before I did canoeing, which is the sport I do now, I was a swimmer. I was part of the Paralympic swimming team. And I had been having some discomfort for a couple of months probably. But I just kind of thought it was, either period pains or training effects, because you never know, especially when you're putting yourself on the limit every day. But I was at a competition up in Scotland, and I just got the most awful pain in my lower right side. And in swimming, you used to kind of do the heats in the morning, then you get a bit of time in the middle of the day to go back to the hotel, rest or whatever it is.
Okay.
And then go back in the evening to compete in the final. And I'd gone all right in the heat in the morning, and then I'd started with this pain. I'd gone back to the hotel, and in those few hours, it had gone from like a niggling pain in my right hand side to just like fully, like, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't straighten up. It was really, really debilitating. And
was that a new kind of pain for you? Like, did it distinguish from other pains that you'd had for training and stuff?
Yes, and much more intense than I'd ever had before. I'd never not been able to get out of bed before. It was a real new one for me. And so I kind of called the doctor and explained what it was. And obviously they didn't have any context of, had I been having it before. It was just kind of, well, we'll see how you go, but let's not race this afternoon. So I ended up pulling out of the competition. And then that started to happen more frequently during training, and it'd be, it's really quite hard to stand up straight this morning, or I'm starting to get just some real painful moments. And so that's when it started to prompt me, I guess, to go to have something looked at by the doctor. But as I'm sure you're aware, many people with endometriosis go through that process, but they don't get an answer for many, many years. And that was that was very much how it happened for me.
Yeah. And when we talk about doctor, because obviously you have, when at competitions, you have your team, don't you, of various different professionals. Yeah. So was it your kind of team doctor, or did we, and then move to GP, or
yes,
how did that work?
So, I mean, I always, anytime I talk about my experience with endometriosis, I always kind of caveat it with, I know I'm very lucky to have very quick access to a medical professional.
Yeah.
In elite sport, we have doctors on our phone that we can just call and go, this isn't quite right. What do you think? Yeah. Whereas I'm aware that not everybody has that luxury. And yet it still took me 8 years to get diagnosed.
And that's really saying something, isn't
it? Absolutely. And so, yes, at that initial point, it was team doctor. And then through our elite sports service, we get then put in towards sort of specialists, if you like. And I went down the route of, initially it was sort of gastro, looking into all of that. And then once that didn't come up with anything, kind of went and saw a gynae specialist. But again, the tests that were done didn't show anything. And so...
What did you have done?
I had internal and external ultrasounds. I had MRIs. The only thing that I didn't have was the surgery, which eventually then I went on to have.
I was the exact same.
Yeah.
External and internal ultrasounds showed absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And one of my MRIs did actually, but that's actually after I got diagnosed and after multiple surgeries.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so you did kind of the standard as the guidelines dictate.
Yeah.
Diagnosis process, and then still found nothing.
Yeah.
So how long did that take, the initial like scans and stuff?
So it took on and off. It wasn't consistently. There were breaks in between, because I did what most people do. You go to see the specialist and it comes back with nothing, and you go away and go, okay, there isn't anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's IBS, which I do have, but I kind of chalked everything up to that.
Okay.
And so it was just go and manage it as and when it comes. And then that was probably a period of, I don't know, 3-4 years. And then after the Rio Paralympics, I moved to canoeing. And at that time, we as a squad were encouraged to go to a road show in Loughborough that they were putting on to talk about all the things that, you know, really are things that we don't talk about enough, which tends to affect female athletes, which was menstrual health, tracking your menstrual cycle, sports bras, all of those things. It was a roadshow to talk about all of that.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
I really want to dig into that while you've touched on it.
Yeah.
I obviously know nothing about this space, but I have heard that it's interesting they Loughborough, because I've heard that Loughborough University are like have an incredible reputation for like sport and things.
Yes. So Loughborough is one of the leading, universities in sport, but also we have the UK Sports Institute has a base there.
Oh, okay.
And they're kind of responsible for all the things around innovation and health in elite sport. And so they kind of invited all the people in the Midlands. So we're based in Nottingham, to go to one of these road shows there. And it was at that point they started to go, you know, this is more for training purposes than anything. It wasn't about, you know, people who might be struggling with a condition. It was, why aren't we tracking our menstrual cycle? Because it can have a huge impact on how you can train and perform. And so that was really their messaging. So when I came away from that, I started to track my menstrual cycle.
Okay.
And it was first and foremost to help me see any responses in my ability to train. But then when I started to use the apps, I started to notice a pattern with when my pain was coming.
Okay.
And then that allowed me to kind of go to the doctor with a bit more information.
And when was that in your cycle, like, in out of interest?
Ovulation, right in the middle.
It's very typical of endometriosis,
yeah,
isn't it?
Right in the middle. Because I always used to think, actually my period was the nicest part of my month.
Really?
Weirdly, like, which isn't, I think, always that common, but it almost felt like the period part of it was almost a breeze compared to mid-cycle, and that was where the issue was.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because they often say like ovulation is, I imagine it's very different, maybe different for athletes, but kind of the normal standard person, so to speak. They often say if you want to really push yourself in training or exercise, do it in ovulation, because you should be feeling amazing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And there are a lot of there's a lot of research in sport. I would say a lot. There's more now than there used to be. I think there's a long way to go. But lots of female athletes actually feel pretty good either on or just after their period. And again, like you say, it's very individual, but it just shows how different your cycle can affect you, you know, from one person to the next. But for me, it certainly started to show up flags. And then I started to get problems with pain during like heavy lifting. And I was starting to get some kind of like stress incontinence, which isn't, I don't think, directly linked to my endometriosis. It's very common in sportswomen who are lifting heavily because, because we all, let's say all, I'm generalizing massively, but a lot of athletes have really dysfunctional pelvic floors, because we try and sort of utilize everything as much as we possibly can.
Okay.
But we're almost overusing our pelvic floor to create, I don't know, stability, strength, power, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of things coming out that incontinence in athletes is quite high in women. Wow. And so I was fortunate enough to be kind of signposted towards a female health physio. And she was sort of really speaking to me about my sort of bladder issues, if you like.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that she had personal experience with endometriosis and her family member.
Oh, okay.
And when I was explaining just, you know, a roundabout symptoms on top of the bladder stuff, she was kind of scribbling away and she said, "You sound like you've got endometriosis." She said, it's so clear that this is, you know, a likely diagnosis. And that was the first time that I'd ever heard the word mentioned.
Wow. So yeah, I was similar actually. It was over 10 years ago now, which is a little bit depressing.
Yeah.
It makes me a bit old.
Yeah.
But I had never heard the word either. So you'd never even heard of like endo as a condition at all?
Nope, nothing. And I'd been to see gynae specialists.
Yeah.
And no one had ever mentioned it. It was just not spoken about. And so after this session, it was during lockdown. So I was on my laptop, and as soon as I shut the Zoom window, I was like, right,
obviously,
I'm gonna like Google and try and find out about it. And it was that I thought, my goodness, like that does sound very similar to what I experience. And it was at that point, combined with all of the, that tracking knowledge, the pain diaries that I got on my phone in the app, I kind of went back to the doctor and said, look, I'm not sure whether this is what I've got. And then immediately went to a gynae specialist and was, thankfully sent to somebody who also read everything and went, I think that's what you've got. But then the challenge was, when do we do the laparoscopy to sort of definitively say yes or no? And I was a bit hesitant to do that, obviously, because it would have a huge effect on my training.
Of course, I can't even imagine how complicated that becomes for you.
Absolutely. When, you're physically, your body is my job.
Yeah.
And my ability to train is my job. But then it got to the point where I'm sure a lot of women get to is actually it's worth the hit of surgery to definitively know what I'm dealing with, because then again, I read it so often, and I'm sure you felt the same. I was starting to question everything about myself. I was like, am I making this up? Is it actually as bad as I think it is? Are we missing something that's, life-threatening? Your mind spirals when you don't have answers. And it got to the point where I was like, actually, a month off of training is worth it to have peace of mind and knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's just a shame that it makes you question your sanity and your, whatever else.
Well, like you say, you said 7 years, so you must have been near the very end of that very long journey.
Yes.
So it's completely understandable and probably like totally natural. I don't know how anyone could, I think lots of women will be able to relate to it, but I don't know how anyone could be on that journey and at some point not be like, you know what, I think I might be losing my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Or am I seriously just making this up?
Absolutely.
Or have I been sat on Google for so long, or thinking, like fixating on this pain so much that I've almost created something.
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right. I felt the same. But again, like you said, and like all the women that I've spoken to and continue to speak to, we're never wrong.
No.
Like we have an instinct.
Absolutely. And I think that is the biggest thing that I felt when I eventually said yes to surgery. And the timeline of it was a bit weird because it was in 2020, the Paralympics in Tokyo had been delayed because of COVID. And so we knew that we were training for the summer in 2021. But that summer was probably the most intense that I was struggling with my symptoms.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I think it felt like that last thing of surgery, we needed to do it then, because if I left it any longer, it would have had a huge impact on Tokyo.
Yeah.
And so we chose to do it. And again, that's the privilege of being involved in elite sport. I could pretty much pick when I had my surgery, which I know is not the case for many, many people. But I chose to have it at the end of 2020, just before Christmas, so that a lot of my recovery was done over my traditional Christmas break anyway.
Yeah, that sounds very smart.
Yeah, so I spent that Christmas day, I'd bubbled up with my mum and my stepdad, and I recovered from surgery at their house. And then I spent that Christmas day in like probably the most loose fitting clothes that I could probably, because it was like 5 days post surgery and I was trying to eat my Christmas dinner. But it meant that when I came round from surgery, and I remember the first thing I asked was like, what did they find? Were we right?
Yeah.
And as soon as the recovery nurse said they found endometriosis, I thought, I was so relieved.
Yeah.
And it's like, how bizarre that women feel relieved that they've been told that they've got this condition that they'll have, for the rest of their lives. But almost always I read that people say, I just felt so validated and I felt so thankful that I'd got an answer.
Yeah, I think it's like depends on your experience in the system, I guess. Like you say, yours is unique in the sports world and that element of it. I mean, lots of things are still very similar, to be honest. But it's that thing of like, I'm believed. I
Yeah.
have this thing that I can be like, you know what, I'm feeling awful or I'm in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
For this very real, very concrete reason, and it kind of just brings your sanity back to you, really.
Absolutely.
That it's like, yeah, it's because I've got this really complicated thing that I have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then I think for me, it was so useful to have that information, and certainly with what I do for my job, knowledge is everything, and athletes love a plan. Like everything, like, you know, we like things to be planned in. You know, we plan our lives in 4-year increments because we're going to the next games if you're in Olympic or Paralympic sport. And so the fact that then I had this extra piece of the puzzle to go, okay, well, we know this is what we're dealing with. How do we deal with it? What do we need to plan for? How do we put things in place that, you know, acknowledge that things aren't going to be 100% some of the time, but that's okay. And what can we do on any given day if I'm not present for training in the best state? What is the best option that day? Is it just it's okay to be at home and it's okay to be resting? That's fine. Yeah. Whereas before there was always that question of, well, it's not really that bad, so I don't really need to go. I don't really need to be at home. I can push through it. Yeah. It allowed me the space to be kinder to myself.
Yeah. Or like, what am I staying at home for? Like, I know I'm in pain, but like, what am I actually, what's like the reason that I'm not training today?
Absolutely. And it gave me that information to have those conversations with people. And actually what it's done, I think, is it's opened that dialogue in my place of work. Like I can now go to female and male members of staff and say, I'm having a really bad endo flare today. And they know what that is. Okay. And so it's starting to educate other people. Yeah. And it's starting to make things, I hope, a more open and less sort of embarrassing conversation to talk about menstrual health or women's health.
Yeah. And was that quite a new conversation, do you think, for your team and maybe the wider world of professional sportsmen and sportswomen?
I think so. And I think I've noticed a definite shift over the last couple of years of certainly not only in the media, there's a lot more of this being talked about, but also in those day-to-day conversations that you have. And some of that came from that roadshow that I was just talking about. Yeah. We all came back from that sort of, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to put our menstrual cycle on our training plan so that the coaches who are planning it know when we're due on our periods. Things like that, which we didn't do before. And so the little group of us that went sort of came back sort of really excited, and we almost kind of not forced them, but we encouraged that environment to grow. And we said, look, we're really keen to do this, but we need our support staff on board, and you're not all women. So the men have got to be on board with this as well. And I'm sure it was uncomfortable for them to start talking about, you're on your period today, how are you feeling? But now it is a much more open space. And I certainly don't feel embarrassed about telling my coach that, like, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I went to have a coil put in. I would have normally gone, oh, I'm going for a little thing. And now, you know, it might be a bit sore for a few days. Whereas now I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a coil put in and this is what's going to happen. And this is probably how I'm going to feel. How do we plan around that? And they were kind of like, okay, let's make a plan. Yeah. Which was great.
It sounds so positive, so refreshing. And I was going to ask you, obviously, because that roadshow is fantastic, that they're talking about menstrual health. So previously in the kind of Olympics, professional sportswomen world, all of that, has that not really been a thing then? We haven't talked about training women in line thinking about menstrual cycles and things like that.
I don't believe so, and I think that's why it's so revolutionary that it's starting to be talked about, because all of the studies are traditionally done on male athletes. We're kind of trying to follow those rules with female athletes, which don't always apply. Yeah. And so I think I think there's probably always been little pockets of investigation. I remember at swimming there was some spit testing that some of the girls were doing to see about the response to the body at certain points of the cycle and all of this stuff, which was to see how it affected energy levels on a daily basis. But I think now the people who are in charge of making the decisions are starting to kind of collate all that knowledge and bring it together to be a bit more focused and a bit more a bit more purposeful, I suppose, about what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because I think in sport, you always you don't want to ever just say, oh, it's an excuse. Like there's a reason for why you're not great today. I think athletes would never want that to be an assumption, but it's also something you can't ignore. And you've got to learn about it so that then you don't fall into the trap of, oh, well, if you're on your period, I'm just not going to expect anything of you.
Yeah.
There's got to be a nuance in it. And so I think now there are a lot more, there's a lot more sort of groups focused towards it. There's things that are being geared directly towards women's sport and women's female athlete research. And so it's a really positive step forward. I still think we're playing catch up, but it's a good step forward.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like even just from that roadshow and the group of you that went, it had a huge impact on you personally.
Hugely.
And just within the team and the sport that you do, obviously there's been massive progress. Absolutely. So if that can be replicated across the board, then that would be incredible.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the thing. We wanted to make sure that we could kind of make the change in our immediate world.
Yeah.
And so we set up a WhatsApp group, of women's health WhatsApp group, and we invite all people to be part of it. But, we share articles, we share podcasts, we share tips, tricks, all these different things. We had a sports bra fitting because, it's little things like that where you don't realize how much of an impact that can have on performance. And it was never really...
Is that not a thing?
Talked about before.
You guys didn't get like proper fittings?
No.
No way.
No. And we were trying to do like high impact sport, and especially in canoeing, there's a lot of rotation.
Yeah.
And we weren't thinking about how we were supported. And it seems like a no-brainer now. We've kind of done it.
Yeah.
But it took somebody like our doctors and, people to kind of really drive it forward to go, actually, this is something we should be doing for our athletes. Like, it can have a huge impact on performance.
Yeah, I suppose there must be so many things that you guys have to think about, and so many things the team has to be across constantly and thinking about, and there's so many moving pieces. But like you say, I suppose that linked with the fact that actually research and probably sometimes some of the basis or foundation has been based on male athletes to replicate to females. Maybe that's sometimes where the gaps are and things like that. But I mean, I as a layman, you'd never think about the fact that just wouldn't happen. You just assume that everyone gets fitted individually and it's just what happens.
No, absolutely not. I mean, and now, yes, it is certainly something that we do have, if you choose to sort of opt into the opportunity.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said about it, I think it is really important that in your space, I think, we kind of look at how much progress we still have to make, and we kind of project into a much larger kind of, we want it to be here and this is the ideal world but you can't go straight there. You've got to start making the progress where you can. And so we were like, okay, what is going to affect our experience? And that is making the world that we're in every day a more open, easily accessed, take the embarrassment away of talking about it, and then hopefully that starts to filter out to other areas, and that's where you start to grow that change.
It sounds like such a fantastic, just strategically how to make that happen. That just sounds like it's got so much common sense. So you had the diagnostic laparoscopy, and obviously you planned that for Christmas.
Yeah.
So, and you talk about Tokyo, and you went on to win a gold, am I right, in Tokyo, which is incredible.
Yeah, 8 months later.
You had surgery, then 8 months later you did that. So what was that time period like for you to kind of get back into it and...
It was... So I only had a diagnostic laparoscopy. I didn't have any endo removed because I'd only agreed to have the surgery that would require the shortest amount of recovery time.
Yeah.
And so I think they'd said, if we just do a diagnostic, you could be back in the boat hopefully within 3 or 4 weeks, which to me felt doable.
Okay.
And so I was back in a boat by mid to late January, so a month after. And then it was about I suppose the biggest thing was trying to like build my core back after having abdominal surgery and being in a boat. They're very unstable, so we use our core an awful lot. And so that was probably the biggest challenge for me, was to kind of get those fine muscles back attuned. But what I will say is that it was really tricky. Before I went in for my surgery, I was trying to look around on social media like you do, and there weren't many athletes who were open about speaking about their experience of having surgery and going back into elite training. And I really wanted to kind of speak to or just touch base with somebody that could give me that reassurance that it wasn't, you know, it wasn't going to write me off completely for the season.
Yeah.
And so I was really grateful that I managed to find 2 other women, para swimmer from Australia, and then Eleanor Barker, British cyclist, who had been quite open with her experience with endo. And the sporting world is quite a small one. And it turns out I knew somebody that knew her. And so they put us in touch with each other.
Okay.
And so she called me. I've never met her in person, but she called me and she said, hey, you're going in for a surgery. I just want to kind of let you know what I found helpful. And she's like, I was back on a bike within, you know, X amount of time.
Yeah.
And just speaking to somebody that had that similar experience was so powerful. And it allowed me to kind of almost let go of that worry of not being able to get back to my original form or whatever. And so I'm really grateful to both of those women for sharing their experience. And I think that's why I was so passionate about then sharing my experience, was that if that could help somebody, you know, even in the tiniest way, I really wanted to do that. And so I think once that worry was alleviated, it just allowed me to kind of be in the process and allow myself to be where I was at in any given day and not sort of project.
Yeah. And what do you think there is a reason for, I mean, it seems like it's getting better, like obviously Eleanor and yourself and a lot of other female athletes, especially with endo, do some great awareness with it. Do you think there's a reason why across the board sometimes it's not always talked about, or people hold it a bit closer to their chest? Is it kind of not the pride like in an ego way, but kind of like, I need to be the best performer, so almost if I put it out there to the world that I've got something else to contend with?
Yeah.
Is there like fear there or anything?
Maybe. I mean, I think for me, none of those things really crossed my mind. I think it could be a whole host of reasons why. And I think some of it comes back to, do you feel comfortable sharing about intimate details or an area that's traditionally not spoken about freely? And I wonder if partly that is it. And then, you know, I think sometimes as well, there's not always, but a lot of times athletes get asked to speak out on certain things. And I don't think you always feel comfortable to do so unless it's something that you really feel passionately about, or if it happens to you or you have lived experience of it. And so I knew it immediately. I was like, I'm more than happy to talk about this and I want to talk about it, because I knew how difficult it was to speak to like-minded people. And so I just wonder if it becomes a bit of a snowball effect then, and you can see the impact it's having. So then you talk about it more, and then more people start to talk about it because more people are talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I think it has like a really nice relationship. But I think it's all down to personal preference as to what you're happy to disclose to the world.
Yeah. And like you say, it's that snowball effect, right? I guess if you see others doing it, then maybe for some that's reassurance of, actually, you know what, maybe I can bring my lived experience to the table if that's what they want to do. Yeah.
And I also think it's about getting away from this old, slightly antiquated stereotype that athletes can't and shouldn't show emotion and shouldn't show, in inverted commas, weakness. I think I used to think that if you showed any chink in your armor, that you were an easy target, whereas I actually don't think that's true. I think people who are willing to emote and in the right way, I think you see more athletes feeling comfortable to do that. Whereas I think before there was always kind of a wall put up because they felt like they had to. Whereas I think that's starting to, or I think it's starting to sort of dampen down in that respect.
And do you think that's like like as new generations come into the sport, that changes? Do you think it's a kind of what do you think?
I think it's probably that. I think it's generational. I think just across the board, I think a lot of people are encouraged to talk more about things that are going on in their lives, aren't they? Like in any aspect. And so I think it is potentially that. And also we have the platform to do it now.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's not just in the newspaper or a television interview. You have like autonomy over what you share, because most people have social media and you can kind of control the narrative in that way. And I think that probably allows people to feel like they can be a bit more open.
Yeah. So you have your diagnosis after 7 years, which must have been an incredibly long 7 years, alongside some very complicated training and, like you say, having to plan every part of your life. Do you think having that diagnosis and having that kind of answer had a like emotional, mental effect for you when you were in Tokyo? Do you think, like, did you feel a difference? Obviously, going on to win gold is incredible. Did you feel a shift for yourself, or?
I don't think I felt a shift for myself when I was there. I think the biggest impact it's had mentally is what I touched on earlier, is I'm kinder to myself on a daily basis,
Oh,
or I
okay.
try to be. It doesn't come easily to me because I think athletes are notoriously hard on themselves. Nothing is ever good enough.
Yeah.
But before I had my diagnosis, I used to just, like I said, push through the pain and then get annoyed at myself if I couldn't train the way I wanted to or do something the way I wanted to. Whereas now I have that information. It's not to explain it away and, like I said before, make an excuse, but it's context.
Yeah.
I know that if I'm struggling with pain on a daily basis or on any given day, is it worth traveling an hour to training, forcing myself into a boat, which is an inherently uncomfortable position to be in if you struggle with abdominal pain? Is it better that I just stay at home and go for a swim, do some yoga, don't do anything at all, and just lie on the sofa with my little TENS machine on, trying to get rid of the pain? But if that's the case, then that's okay, and I don't have to force anything.
Yeah.
And so then I think then that had an impact on my training, because when I was at training, I was working with what my body was giving me. I wasn't fighting against it, and I think that allowed me to train more smartly and therefore would train better in the long run, which then had an impact on performance.
Yeah, that's really refreshing to hear, actually. It's really lovely to hear, because I think, especially for young people on social media, we know how huge that is. And for people that are they're not Olympians or professional sportsmen, maybe some, but a lot of them are kind of the influencing in the sport and fitness area. And I think there is a real rhetoric a lot out there of like, you just have to keep going, you never stop, you like there's never an excuse not to train, like all that kind of stuff. And actually to hear it from someone like yourself, which is just so honest and so refreshing, of actually you just, like you say, work with your own body. And actually I think there's a real like fallacy and kind of view sometimes that Olympians or professional sportsmen just constantly go 24 hours a day and never stop and always have to train.
No, I saw a really funny I'm speaking like a true millennial here, but I saw a really funny like meme on social media, and it was like the difference between some, not all, some influencers in the elite sports space or in the sports space, and it's like go, 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 and then it's flashed to like an elite athlete who is literally sitting down as much as they possibly can, lying down, going, no, I've got to rest. I've got to rest. Like I can't possibly do one more thing because I've got to rest. And also like eating as much food as you can, and just it just, there is a difference, I think, sometimes, and I think elite athletes, I think it's good for people to hear, like, not everybody is going to be an elite sports person, not everybody wants to be, and not everybody wants to be out at the gym every day. But I think it's about being honest, and I think I've been better at listening to my body about what it needs probably in the last 3-4 years than I have for my entire career.
Wow.
And partly that is because of my endo diagnosis. Another part is I'm getting older, and so you can't do the things the way that you used to, and there's no point trying, because ultimately it's counterproductive.
Yeah.
Because you end up in a worse space for trying to do more.
Yeah.
And so the only way to train in a smart way, or to function in a smart way, is to listen to your body and meet it where it's at, and allow yourself to, if today is only 40% of what you normally have, that might be the most you've got that day, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the best bits of advice anyone can take, actually. And that just goes across the board, doesn't it? We can be talking about sport, we can be talking about
absolutely
every element of life. And actually, like you say, obviously, the further you go into your career, the more life experience that you have. Do you think it is easier for you now, with the kind of life experience and what you've done previously, to have that communication with your own body?
Yes, definitely. And also, I'm sitting here as a 3-time Paralympic champion, and I am very aware that when you have results to back up what you're arguing,
yes,
people will listen to that, because they go, well, of course, what you've done in the past works for you.
Yeah.
And so you've got the lived experience of it. I can imagine it's much harder to do that as an up and coming athlete who is just starting out. Of course, they don't have the years of experience. And so to find that at an early age is really hard.
Yeah.
But I think that's why the change in this conversation hopefully makes it a bit easier for them to find it earlier.
Yeah.
Because people are talking about being intuitive in your training and talking about things that might have an effect earlier.
Yes.
And so hopefully then that has an effect that they can find that sense of self a little bit earlier in their career than perhaps I did.
Yeah, I suppose if we're bringing like to talk about the mental health conversation, obviously a lot more things with that, but that in itself, we're bringing that to the table and we're training athletes to listen to that and to sync with that and to track that from a really young age. I suppose it puts you in great stead, doesn't it? And you're not going to be on catch up potentially as much as other people that have done that later.
Definitely. So I hope it's changing, and I hope that, I think that's a big thing for a lot of athletes. They want to leave sport in a better place than it was when they first came in. It's a big thing. It's like you want to leave a legacy and you want to felt like you've moved the world and the conversation on, and this is one small way that we can do it. There are many other ways, but I hope that it's starting to change.
Yeah, well, it sounds like from what you said, it definitely is. So in terms of now living with endo, you know that you have it and you're a few years in from that diagnosis. How at the moment does that affect you day to day, both as Charlotte and a person and a woman, but also as a professional athlete? How does it affect you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me has been the knowledge and the ability to try and come up with ways of how I best cope with my symptoms. So I've tried various contraceptive pills to try and nullify the symptoms I feel. Some have worked better than others. I'm in the very early stages of trying the Mirena coil at the moment.
Okay.
Which was a tricky thing to have done, but that's the one that I'm trying at the minute because the ones I was on before weren't working. Also about finding the things that, for me, acupuncture works really well to kind of help free up, abdomen, back, body. I found that really works.
Yeah.
And so it's about management. I think you never know what you'll know. You never know what you're going to deal with on a daily basis. Some days I don't feel like I have endometriosis. Some days I'm okay.
Yeah.
Some days it's like I wake up and I go, oh, it's a bit painful. And it's always my right side, always seems to be that lower right side that is the thorn in my side, almost, literally.
Yeah.
But some days I can put up with that sort of dull ache. Other days it's actually, no, I can't get out of bed. I need to just lie here and let it be. But I think it's been just managing it. And you're trying to choose what fire you put out on any given day.
Yeah. Sometimes, sometimes you have, like, say, one that's fairly like, okay, I acknowledge you. I know you're there. We can probably continue and just kind of keep an eye on you. And sometimes it's like, okay, I've got 10 fires that I need to fight all at the same moment.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Like, it's like, I feel like, not that I would ever, but it feels like if I was running a nursery and I've just got like 10 kids that all having a screaming tantrum all at the same moment.
Very good. Yes, that's exactly how it feels. And also the things that I didn't know would be, of course you think once you know something, you go, of course that's connected. But sometimes I'd wake up and I've got really bad back pain. But then my job, I always pretty much have back pain. The fact that I use prosthetics, I have back pain. But then if my endo's kicking off, of course I'm going to be sitting in a slightly different position. I'm going to be protecting a space in my body. At the moment, I am wickedly anemic because I've been struggling through, various contraceptive things that haven't been working.
Yeah.
And so I was like, why am I tired all the time? And then I go to the doctor, have a blood test and go, okay, well, that's why you're tired all the time.
Yeah.
So there's all these unseen things that have an impact that you don't always put two and two together until you have to.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you go, oh, okay, that kind of explains why I'm feeling this.
Yeah, and there are loads of like the textbook, so to speak, endo symptoms, and we've talked about some of them, like heavy bleeding, chronic pain, fatigue, painful intercourse, like all those are kind of like what the textbook says.
Yeah.
But I found over the past 10 years, it's almost like endo creates new ones just to keep me on my toes.
Yeah.
Like I've occasionally had things, I remember when, I mean, quite a few people have it now that I've done the research, but I remember when I first started getting like horrendous leg pain, it felt like there were like bolts of lightning like going down my legs, and then parts of my legs would feel really numb. So I'd be like, I know I can walk, but it's a bit disconcerting because I can't quite feel. So it just felt like, sometimes it's like, here's a new one, like contend with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, but I'm always kind of like, I don't want to attribute everything to my endo, but then the more that you read, it's like it has a huge impact on so many different areas of your body and the way that you feel. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm certainly learning a lot, and I'm learning a lot from people that I have since connected with on social media or online. And, you know, some of the stories that you read and see people living, that's why I get so angry when people say, oh, it's just a bad period, isn't it? And I think there's literally people losing organs to this. There's people, dying because of complications of it. And I think that's another really important thing about podcasts like this is education is so important, even for people that don't have it. I bet they know somebody who has got it, whether they're diagnosed or not, because it's so common, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so the more that we can educate people about actually what it is, I think then all of these conversations start to become easier in every single way. And then, big thing for me is recently is like trying to lobby for real change from the government and from the people that make the decisions.
Yeah.
So that there's more funding put into research. There's more understanding and education in workplaces so that people feel able to go to their boss and go, I've got endometriosis. This is how it can affect me, and not fear that they're going to be sacked.
Yeah.
That's how we start to make more meaningful change.
Yeah. What do you think, from your perspective of like the lobbying that you're doing at the moment, what do you think there's so many things that need to change, as we know we are massively behind. But for you, in terms of what you'd like to see, what's up there?
So I think, I've been doing quite a lot of work with Endometriosis UK recently, and for Action Month, I went down with them to Parliament to go and meet MPs. And what I was really heartened by was that constituents had reached out to their MPs and they came to see.
Good.
Now, whether anything gets done from it, but the first step is they actually came to talk to people who had a lived experience, which I wasn't sure would happen. Yeah. So I was pleasantly surprised when I went down, and I had good conversations with a lot of MPs from across all political parties. But I think the main thing that they were trying to talk about was that education piece, because I think that underpins so many of the other bits that we want to work towards.
Yeah.
And so it's about educating people in school, girls and boys, to kind of learn about it at an earlier age. And then also the big thing was in the workplace, because there were so many people that I met there that had really horrifying stories of not feeling supported in their workplace, and then either being sacked or feeling like they got to leave their job. And in this day and age, that shouldn't be happening.
No, and that's massive, isn't it? Like nowadays, we can't afford to have only one income in the household. Absolutely. Realistically, you need both people doing that. So if you've got one that has to leave a job because of a debilitating condition, that's going to put loads of people in a really bad way.
Absolutely. And so I think it was a brilliant first step, and there was a lot of really good conversation, but of course that only matters if it gets affected into actual change. And so hopefully the more we keep banging the drum, more people will listen. We hope.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, we need to just keep going. There isn't really an option now, is there, to just be like, we'll just have to sit back and wait and see if anything happens. It has got to the point, I think, because you're right, it's 1 in 10 for endometriosis, 1 in 5 for polycystic ovarian syndrome, 1 in 10 for adenomyosis, and 1 in 20 for PMDD. Yeah. So if you have 20 women in your life, which I think a lot of people could say, whether it's close friends or kind of work colleagues, I think everyone could probably say they've got that many women
and
in
that's
their life.
Diagnosed. How many people are not diagnosed? I'm sure that's probably undervaluing how many people are struggling with all of these conditions. And it goes back to that thing of like, if people aren't being diagnosed, they don't know they've got it. And so yes, we're sitting here saying like 1 in 10 for endometriosis, but from the amount of people that I have met and spoken to, I would imagine that it's a lot more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're probably right, because you're right, that journey is so long. Just as we're probably getting that statistic of 1 in 10, you might have, 3, 4, 5, maybe half that are waiting.
Yeah. Or how many people give up?
Yes.
Going through
so many
diagnosis.
women have said to me that they just don't want to go back anymore. They just don't want to go to the GP. They don't want to go to anyone.
And so, and I think that also, I remember when I was I think it all comes down to that initial education. I remember when I first started having the conversation about periods at school, it was almost assumed that everybody would have this horrendous time and it's going to be painful and it's going to be this. And so you almost kind of go, when you do come to the age of having a menstrual cycle, you kind of almost just put up with it because you've been conditioned to think that it's going to be this painful thing. And so how many young girls and women are out there in horrendous pain, but not even knowing that they should go and have a conversation with a doctor because it's not normal.
Yeah.
And that's where that sort of miseducation it's doing people a disservice, because they're putting up with stuff that they really shouldn't have to.
Yeah, you're so right. It's either demonized from when you're like 11 years old, and then you then just think, and then it almost creates, I've spoken to a lot of women where it creates a narrative of we are then conditioned to almost end up hating our own bodies, and the part of us that makes us female, that makes us so special, that definitely I think does give us an edge and a power if we use it in the right way above others. And so it's demonised from an early age. But then I remember when I obviously started at 16 having my endo symptoms, not that I knew what it was, it's just when I started my period.
Yeah.
And even though they'd said to us, like, it's going to be this awful thing and blah, 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 I then was in so much chronic pain to the point where I was like doubled over and I couldn't leave the house because the bleeding was so bad. When you then go and speak to someone, it's then like, oh, but it's just a period. It's just part of being a woman. So it's like, hold on.
Yeah.
It's this demonised, horrendous thing. But then also, I'll just get on with it because it's just part of being a woman.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, even just talking about it like this, there's no wonder that it's such a minefield, is it? Like when two people who have got endometriosis sit here and can easily relate to every single thing we've just talked about.
Yeah.
There's no wonder it's so hard to get a diagnosis or to get women to think that there's something that they need to have looked into.
Yeah.
And so it's certainly, it is a minefield and it's a really complicated situation. It's a really complicated world to be in, but it's certainly one that needs exploring, and conversations like this, like I can't imagine that sort of 5 years ago that there'd have been podcasts about talking about women's health. Like these conversations are important. Definitely.
And if there is a young woman listening to this podcast that loves a particular sport or is kind of going down that road and maybe has already got a diagnosis or is struggling with something, is on that path potentially to something like endo and is scared or worried about pursuing that dream and that love of sport, is there any advice or anything that you would say to her?
Absolutely. And I think first and foremost, it would be, don't let it dampen the dream. It is possible. And I think hopefully you can see it in the media. There are elite sportswomen doing incredible things in a whole host of sports who have not only endometriosis, but things like polycystic ovaries and all of those things, which you might end up thinking, well, that's going to put a stop to it. But it doesn't have to. If you, find the right people to support you through it, because you can't do it by yourself and you shouldn't have to. But also try and go to the people that are relevant, armed with as much information as possible as to how it affects you. Because like we've touched on, it can affect people in so many different ways. And you've almost got to help people to understand your experience of it.
Yeah.
And then when you start having those conversations, you can start to align how then it fits in with your chosen sport, if that's what you want to do. And I know I came from swimming. You have to almost feel willing to talk about it. So I'd say don't let it stop you, but make sure that you really create an environment around you that can kind of support you through it, because that's important.
Yeah, it sounds like picking your tribe, picking the people, 100%. Picking the community is a linchpin for everything that we've talked about today, whether it's your sporting career and or dealing with endometriosis or anything else.
Absolutely, because support is so important, and you can't make change on your own. You need people to do it with you, and it makes it a better experience, you would hope. And so it's a huge thing to find the people that get you and want to help you. That's what I'd say to young sports people, whether they've got endometriosis or not.
Yeah.
Finding the people that are right for you and will support you in the right way is the most important thing to pursue in a successful sporting career.
Yeah. And I guess knowing the people that aren't right is as important as knowing the people that are right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the older you get, the easier it becomes to sift those into the correct categories. Not always, but it becomes easier the older you get.
Yeah. Now, there is something that I always ask guests at the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
And I know that in some ways your diagnosis, when you actually got it, was a few years ago, but not too many years ago.
Yeah.
But is there a piece of advice that if you could give to women that are listening right now, but also to yourself, maybe when you first, in 2013, when you first started getting those symptoms and going on that journey, is there anything that you would say to her that you think she would have needed hearing?
Yeah. Keep a record of every symptom earlier.
Okay.
Build the knowledge and the bank of information a lot earlier, because it becomes a lot easier to then have the conversations with evidence to back it up.
Yeah.
But I'd also say on top of that is you have to be tenacious and you can't take no for an answer. If you believe that something is wrong, you have to trust it. And that's where it comes into then if you're not by yourself, and it can become hard, can't it, to go, I'm not being believed. I don't want to keep advocating for myself.
Yes.
Why should I have to do it?
Yeah.
Why should I have to keep banging this drum? If you've got those people around you, when it becomes hard for you, you've got other people to kind of help you bang that drum. And so those two things go hand in hand. Have the information and don't take no for an answer, and trust your gut.
Yeah, I think that's incredible advice. And I love the use of the word tenacious as well, because we have got a system that is there to help us, but it's a very complicated and a very tricky system. Yeah. And like you say, things can go wrong and people can get led in the wrong direction or, dismissed or whatever it is. So yeah, I think tenacious is a great way to try and behave when you're playing that system.
And we've got to help the medical professionals. It's a complicated thing, and the way that it's diagnosed at the moment is so severe, like having to have a surgery. Of course they're not going to send everybody to go and get cut open at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
So I kind of took it from the viewpoint that I need to help them to help me as best I can.
Yeah.
Yes, there are things inherently wrong with the system and make it harder, but we've also got to they're part of the people that you've got to work with to kind of help get that diagnosis. And so anything that we can do to kind of aid them, I think will then help in the long run as well.
Yeah, I suppose you've got to remember you want them on your team, don't you?
You do.
You want to bring them into the inner circle.
Absolutely.
Rather than, it's obviously tempting because there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration, which is totally normal. But I suppose, if we allow that to break any relationship with them, we're not going to get what we need in the end, are we?
No, and I think if you've got a good medical professional, sort of keep hold of them, because they are worth their weight in gold.
They are. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You've been fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much.
It was so lovely to have you on, and it has been such a kind of a treat for me to be able to learn about the sports world and just have a dive into that and all the important stuff, like we say, about menstrual health and endometriosis in relation to that. Yeah. So I think you've given a real insight. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I loved our girl chat this week. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to hit the follow button wherever you're listening. To find out more about us or today's guest, then head to the show notes. Until next time, I'm Alexandra, and remember, it's not just a period.